We are in the week of April 20th through the 24th. This is one of our last six slides, and let's go ahead and start talking about it. It is called the Spiral Jetty. It's by the artist Robert Smithson. He's an American, and this is located in the Great Salt Lake of Utah. This is classified as an earthwork. You could also put it under other umbrellas such as site art, earth art, even land art. And the material that it's made out of is mud, precipitated salt crystals, basalt rocks, and water coil. And that's going to kind of get us started talking about this particular side. As you can see, it's in a particular shape. Okay, it's in the shape of a coil, and that's going to be really important, or spiral, as we discuss a little bit more about this piece. If you can, do just a little bit of annotating. I just wanted you to make note that the actual pathway, the walkway of the actual spiral, it's measuring about 15 feet in width. And then overall, this entire spiral itself is over 1,500 feet. And what's kind of neat is it's in the shape of a spiral and it's visible in photographs taken from space. And then again, the as you can see in this particular photo when this was taken, the water is encompassing the entire spiral. And what is actually happening to the water inside is it's making it kind of like a pinkish reddish water, and it's caused by the saline and algae. And that was something specific the artist was wanting to have happen as nature and the waters would rise. And this he intentionally knew that this would happen. And then again, the black basalt encrusted rocks are, excuse me, mess that up. The black basalt rocks are encrusted with salt crystals, and that's something that's really also important if you can just note down. So, again, 15 feet wide, 1,500 feet in diameter. Um, Pink red water caused by saline algae, if you can just make that little note right here. And then the black basalt rocks are encrusted with salt crystals. And that's kind of just over time, that's what has happened. So, a little bit about Robert Smithson. He represents a movement that gained a lot of attention in the 1970s called Earth Art. Okay, and you can think about Earth Art if you go back to the Great Serpent Mound that we later on had, or earlier on had discussed from the indigenous section that was located in Ohio. Though it's also known, again, you can also have these, make sure you have these classifications: site art, land art, or earthworks. It evolved beginning in the 1960s with the conjunction of two forces. So if you can put this down, 1960s, this is what's about to happen before we see this piece be made. The beginning of the environmental movements with heightened awareness of environmental destruction. Oh, and I'm sorry, the date for this is 1970. I didn't include that earlier for the identification. So in the 60s, again, this is before he actually constructed this, we were starting to see specifically in the States, we're starting to see some sort of a beginning of an environmental movement and awareness. And then the second thing is a growing frustration among many artists with the art market. Okay, and we'll get into discussing that in a little bit. So basically, where we're gonna kind of shift our gears is we're not in any type of a museum or gallery at this point. We're in nature. So that's kind of an important feature about what Robert Smithson is trying to address is taking their art out of the gallery and into nature. These artists of this time were rebelling against what they saw as oppressive limitations of 20th century patrons of dealing with materialistic speculating on art dealers and art collectors who could make huge profits by buying and selling art. So, again, during the 1960s, Smithson became increasingly disenchanted with the world of the museums and art galleries and the cycle of production and display, of sale and exchange. What he dreamed of is creating a work of art that could not be bought or sold, that could simply exist and persist like a modern equivalent to the great ruined monuments of vanished civilizations. So this led him, like other earthwork artists, to create monumental works in remote locations that most people would never have a reason to go to. So in In particular, to get to this particular set, you have to drive 2 hours to get to it from Salt Lake City. So it's almost like a pilgrimage route you would be encountering. Many earthwork artists create works designed to be temporary. If we were to have done the global contemporary section, there was an artist, or actually it was a husband and wife. Their names are Christo and Jean-Claude. They created a temporary piece that was in New York for not even a month. It was called The Gates. We would be comparing this particular piece with that. But basically, the intention is the spiral jetty is to remain until, like all other things, it would ultimately succumb to the forces of entropy. So, which means just transforming of the society and of culture, really just letting nature take its toll on it and not worrying about how it's ultimately affecting the overall site. Let's just talk a little bit about the form for a second. So Smithson contracted with two local builders to use earth-moving machinery to move 6,600 tons of black basalt rock and dirt into a spiral extending over, again, 1,500 feet onto this Lake Roselle Point. Okay. He liked the red color of the water there, and over time, as the water level had risen and fallen, the blackness of the basalt had become obscured by salt crystals. And you might be asking, what is the significance of a spiral? There's just a few things, if you just want to jot down, that I would advise you to put down, recommend. That's important because the spiral means a lot. So it alludes to earlier prehistoric native earth art, especially the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. So if you can remember the Great Serpent Mound, how it was kind of like almost like a snake-like, but then it had a little bit of some coiling, like spiraling going on. It's alluding to that. So again, earlier prehistoric Native American earth art. Another one is that it's a symbol that appears in ancient art around the globe. Another reason is its particular archetypal shape that appears in nature from galaxies to seashells. So the spiral, just wanted to kind of show you some other images of it. We'll talk about some of these. Here's Smithson, and here's his pathway, his walkway. And again, I just wanted to include some images where you have people, so you can see how small people are compared to the actual site. So when we're talking about the spiral, how we see it already in nature and galaxies and seashells, it's an important shape to kind of just keep in mind. It's a dialectical shape that basically just means it opens and closes, it curls, it uncurls, and it's endlessly, suggesting growth and decay, creation and destruction, or in Smithson's own word, the perceptual coming and going of things. And that's really, really important to just kind of have that be a theme. So again, just that impression of the way that it can coil, it can uncoil, close, it can open, and just suggesting growth or decay. Okay, we'll just come back to that side. Native Americans believe, retold by the Mormon settlers, that the Great Salt Lake is connected by the Pacific Ocean through a whirlpool in the center. Um, in the center, yeah, looking at my notes, excuse me. It was believed that there was some sort of a connection between the way that this spiral was created, that it would actually open up, have some sort of a um, underwater passage to the Pacific Ocean. So Native Americans had some sort of a belief that was retold by some Mormon settlers. His first impression on seeing the site, he wrote, was that it reverberated out to the horizons, only to suggest this immobile cyclone. A dormant earthquake spread into the fluttering stillness into a spinning sensation without movement. This feeling of spinning while at the same time standing still inspired Smithson's design, a 1,500-foot long black basalt coil. And just to wrap us up, just to talk a little bit about the site. So Smithson chose this particular site because of it being remote. And again, it's about 100 miles northwest of the Great Salt Lake City, excuse me, Salt Lake City. So, and the really only way accessible to travel to this particular site would be like on a four-wheel drive. In 69, Smithson took out a 20-year lease on an abandoned lakeside industrial site. The water was red from saline algae and fouled with chemicals and tailings. The shore was littered with obsolete machinery, and the whole place looked like a ruined moonscape. And basically, this suited him perfectly. The name site of Oh, the main site trapped fragments of junk and waste, transported one into a world of modern prehistory. So a little bit about Smithson real quick, just to conclude. He knew most people would never see Spiral Jetty, so he actually documented every stage of its creation through photos and film. 2 years after its completion, the water did rise and completely submerge for over 30 years. Um, and currently, it has the subject of, and that's part of like the subject of the randomness of nature, as Smithson understood it would be. Currently, it's actually there's a drought going on, so if you travel to it right now, it more than likely, oh, I don't include an image for it, but it's pretty much where there's no water. You won't be, if you were to come see it, uh, you wouldn't have to worry about water at all interfering. He was 92 in 1970 when he completed this, and 3 years after he was actually doing some photographing from a plane when the plane crashed outside of Amarillo, Texas, and he ultimately died. So just a little bit of some other additional information for the Spiral Jetty. Um, Again, this is in the Great Salt Lake, Utah. So hopefully maybe one time in your lifetime you'll be able to come see this in person. Pretty cool. All right, this is Miss Howard signing out.